Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. If you're not new here, welcome back. So today we will actually be starting a new mini-series called Haunted History. So in today's episode we will be starting off with a place called Jemison Center, which is also known as the Old Bryce Hospital here in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. I have actually visited the Jemison Center and conducted a paranormal investigation, and let me just say we had a lot of activity from a specific spirit named Sam, but we will actually get into the haunted history part in the second part of the story. But yeah, so we are actually just going to start off with the brutal history of the mental health facility called the Jemison Center, which is also known as the Bryce Hospital, which now known as Old Bryce Hospital. So before we get started in today's story, let's go ahead and grab a cozy blanket, maybe an ice cold beverage, maybe an alcoholic beverage. Today I'll be drinking red wine. Leave in the comments down below what you'll be drinking, and if you are snacking on anything, let us know what you're snacking on. Okay, so let's get started. Alright, so we are starting way back in 1830s. That is when the Jemison family settled here near Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Well, Robert Jemison Jr., he was one of the Confederate senators, a businessman, and an entrepreneur. He had, he owned the toll roads and bridges, a grist mill, a sawmill, livery stables, a hotel, and even 6 plantations totaling over 10,000 acres. He was also one of the leaders here in Alabama that showed and helped build support for the Alabama State Hospital for the Insane, which was then later on renamed as the Bryce Hospital, and the Bryce Hospital opened in 1861 here in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So after Robert Jemison Jr.'s death in 1871, his largest plantation, which was also known as the Cherokee Place, was then left to the State of Alabama Board of Mental Health. So during the segregation era, there was actually a separate facility for the African American patients, and that would actually be the lofts of the barn at the Bryce Hospital. And that was actually before the Jemison Center was actually built. So the Jemison Center actually saw it important for the patients to be working in the fields. But because they actually did have limited state funding, they actually became self-sustainable due to the patients working in the fields. But with the local residents, it actually was starting to be seen as a source of free labor. So it became a huge public concern. So with that being said, by the 1960s, the concept of patients actually staying in hospitals for long periods of time while also working like hard labor, that's when the public concern started happening, because it really was just like a free labor source, and they weren't getting paid, and yeah, they had limited state funding for upkeep, but it is a huge concern if you think about it. I'm sure there's a lot of those kinds of issues going on still to this day. But this started a huge movement for mental health patients and all mental health facilities. However, we are going to jump into 1970. I will be reading a direct quote from a journalist from the local news called Tuscaloosa News. It starts off as, quote, "Human feces were caked on the toilets and walls, urine-soaked aged floors, many beds lacked linens, patients were sleeping on the floor, One small shower served 131 male patients. The 75 female patients only had one shower too. Most of the patients at Jemison were highly tranquilized and appeared to have not bathed in days. All appeared to lack any semblance of treatment. The stench was almost unbearable. So, due to that, there was a huge landmark lawsuit, which it actually was called Wyatt versus Stickney, because, I mean, that's absolutely terrible. I mean, I have worked in a local hospital. Like, the patients weren't, like, sitting in their feces and urine, and it was, like, only, like, a short period of time, because all I did was collect blood, and, like, when they just, defecated on themselves, and they can't, get up into it themselves, it was horrid. So I can only imagine a patient lying down in their feces and urine for days, weeks, months, who knows how long. Like, it was just a lot of, like, neglect. But there were actually also several fires that have happened there. And I'm sure, actually, I don't know, I'm not completely sure, but I'm sure there was a lot of, like, safety hazards there. I mean, they also had a lack of funding, which is no excuse whatsoever, but do better, be better, which we do have a new Bryce Hospital, and laws, compliance and regulations, policies, they have all updated since then. But just to think, like, that's not, too long ago, like 1970s, 1960s, that's not, far behind us. Okay, so at the Bryce Hospital, they had over 5,000 patients living in those conditions. And the Montgomery Advertiser compared it to a concentration camp, which is very, like, can only imagine. But yeah, so Wyatt's aunt actually testified about the improper treatment. It was apparently to make the patients more manageable, to also have them tranquilized, so you're not, like, having to entertain them, watch them, they're just lying down, tranquilized, not being able to move, talk, not even say they're hungry or anything like that. I couldn't. But yeah, in 1971, the lawsuit actually expanded to all the other, like, Alabama's, like, inpatient mental health facilities, and that then resulted in the court-ordered agreement for the federal minimum standards for the care of people with mental illness. And as for the mentally ill, like, patients that, like, stay in institutional settings, but those standards were called the Wyatt Standards. They are founded on the 4 criteria for evaluation of care, which are humane, psychological, and physical environment, the qualified and sufficient staff for administration of treatment, individualized treatment plans, and minimum restriction of patient freedom. It wasn't until 33 years later that the Wyatt versus Stickney came to a conclusion. Goodness. That actually, hands down, like, I agree, like, this was the, like, longest mental health case in national, not state, but national history. The state of Alabama, like, the litigation expenses actually estimated at over $15 million. Could you imagine? So, after learning, that tidbit of history, I do actually want to read from the tuscaloosanews.com. I will put the link down below. I'll actually put the link down below for all of my sources that I'm using. But this particular article, it is by Jason Morton. It was published at 11:01 p.m. Central Time on December 30th, 2019, and it was updated at 10:53 p.m. Central Time on December 31st, 2019. So I bring this up because I actually want to read all of this in its entirety. So I am quoting this entire article because when I read it, I just felt like, yes, I could summarize it, but the way Jason Morton writes it, it just needs to be heard. If you feel me? Okay, so the article starts with, quote, when Dr. Peter Bryce helped open the Alabama Insane Hospital in Tuscaloosa in 1861, he helped establish the city as the mental health care capital of Alabama. The hospital, later renamed Bryce Hospital in his honor, was the state's first hospital for people with mental illness. But at its peak, Tuscaloosa would be home to 6 state mental health facilities. Among them were Bryce Hospital, the W.D. Partlow Developmental Center for people with intellectual disabilities, the Taylor Hardin Secure Medical Facility for the criminally insane, 2 psychiatric nursing homes, and a geriatric mental health center. Bryce Hospital was established by the legislature as the Alabama Insane Hospital in 1852 on a tract of land east of the University of Alabama campus. A state-of-the-art facility in its day, the hospital opened in 1861, with Bryce as its first superintendent. The legislature renamed it in his honor in 1900. Once serving as many as 5,000 patients from 48 counties across the state, a landmark federal class action lawsuit in the 1970s over the conditions at Bryce led to the deinstitutionalization movement in mental health treatment in Alabama and nationwide. This eventually led to a shift away from institutional care that saw the closure of other facilities across the state, including Searcy Hospital in Mount Vernon, Grill Memorial Psychiatric Hospital in Montgomery, and in 2011, the W.D. Partlow Developmental Center. The W.D. Partlow Developmental Center opened in Tuscaloosa in 1919 and served as the only residential facility for people with intellectual disabilities in Alabama. Once home to as many as 2,500 patients, Partlow's closure in 2011 sent approximately 151 patients to community care across the state and eliminated the jobs of almost 500 employees, including nurses, doctors, therapists, social workers, and support staff. The Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program, which monitored Alabama Department of Mental Health's clients after they left the institutions, advocated for the closure of Partlow and called for more community-based care, contending that living in the community offered clients a better quality of life. Local leaders and others have questioned the decision to close the mental health facilities, however, citing cuts in state mental health funding that have led to long wait lists for mental health services and an ever-increasing demand on law enforcement and local jails. Now, Bryce Hospital is no longer on the grounds where it first opened at the start of Civil War. Instead, it operates in a new $81 billion facility on the former Partlow site near the intersection of Helen Keller and University Boulevards. It's one of the just 3 remaining state mental health facilities in the state, alongside the Harper Geriatric Psychiatry Center and Taylor Hardin, all of which are in Tuscaloosa. The University of Alabama purchased the Bryce property from the Department of Mental Health in 2010, paying nearly $77 million for the 168 acres and an additional $10 million for environmental cleanup and historic preservation. UA managed construction of the new hospital as part of the agreement. The university is renovating the old Bryce Hospital, preserving the main building and its iconic cupola for use by the Department of Theater and Dance, and is building a $60 million, 130,088 square foot center that will connect to the north side of historic main building. The new Bryce Hospital opened in July 2014. This 260,000 square foot state-of-the-art facility has classrooms, medical and dental clinics, recreational and fitness areas, including interior courtyards, a cafeteria, barbershop, library, chapel, and post office. The facility has 268 beds in a mix of private and double rooms, up from the approximately 250 beds in the old Bryce when it closed in 2014, and is designed to be more like a home than its predecessor. Its intent is to serve as a safety net for committed individuals in need of longer-term care, while the community-based care is serving the larger population. So yeah, this article is very interesting to me, because I have seen the Taylor Hardin sign, but I had no idea that was a state mental health facility. But yeah, you can actually see the new Bryce on the bridge coming from Tuscaloosa and to Northport, and it's actually very beautiful. But yeah, I am glad a lot has changed, because that's just brutal, especially for people that are born with mental illness. You can't help that, but I mean, it's biology 101, really. It's sad, but things are better, and things are still bad in some places, but that's what, the law, policies, compliance, regulations, that's what those are for. It's very heartbreaking how they were treated, not only of the feces and urine, but trigger warning, but the abuse, the physical abuse, mental abuse, the lobotomies you would get for having a mental illness. I can't even comprehend the fear that the patients would be feeling during those times. But yeah, so that is today's, history so far for that. This is part 1. There will be a part 2, which will include more of the history, of the haunted aspect. But this is haunted history, so in each episode we will have 2 parts. The first part will be the history of the haunted location, and then the second part will be the history of the haunting location. But yeah, this mini-series should be very exciting, I hope, and also shed light on issues that have not only, happened in the past, but history does tend to repeat itself. So, yeah, I will also be putting down like resources for mental health down in the description box below. If you'd like, you can comment, like, and subscribe, and I hope to see you guys in part 2. This will be in a, I mean, as you can tell, but like a form of not very many like videos, but more of like podcast form. Yeah. So, yeah, I will see you guys next time. I hope you guys have a great weekend, whenever this video finds you. Okay, yeah. I'll see you all next time, okay?